Hi, everybody.
Hello there,
Jerry.
Linda and Gizmo.
We're the Village's Newcomers. Some of you saw our show earlier this week. It was a review of a movie. There was a movie filmed over a couple of year period here in the Villages called Some Kind of Heaven, and it's been met with mixed reviews.
It has.
Some people enjoyed the movie, but a great many people thought that it gave a very unflattering look to the Villages. So today, I feel really lucky to get the director of that movie to appear with us, and he's going to kind of explain his thought process and the things that went into making that movie. Recently, a movie was released, and it kind of took the Villages by storm. Some people love it, some people don't love it. We liked it. You might have seen our review on YouTube.
Yes.
But today we are so thrilled to have the creator, the director, the guy behind the movie, Some Kind of Heaven. And we'd like to welcome you today, Lance.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, guys. I'm a big fan of this show. I'm a big fan of your dog, wherever your dog is. And I was very thrilled and somewhat relieved when I saw your review. So thank you.
Just to let you know, he doesn't like to be called dog. It's Gizmo. He doesn't know he's a dog.
Gizmo.
But for you folks out there, this is Lance Oppenheim. Now, Lance is a Harvard grad and a movie maker. And we actually saw one of his productions. Was that fair to say, a production?
You can say so. It makes it sound much more legitimate than it probably was. But I'll take it. Thank you.
It was called The Happiest Guy in the World. We saw it about a year ago.
Yeah. And
it's a 10-minute or so short film about a guy that lives his life on a cruise ship.
That's crazy.
He doesn't own a home. He goes from one voyage to another. I don't know what he's doing during COVID, but that was a very interesting movie, and amusing on one hand and a little sad on the other hand, kind of like the Villages movie. But we enjoyed both of them.
Well, thank you for watching any of my stuff and not throwing tomatoes at the screen, as I'm sure other villagers are probably doing right now. But no, I think you're totally right. You're very perceptive. I mean, I think the idea of, or I guess thematically of around The Happiest Guy in the World, the film about the retiree living on a cruise ship, I was really interested in a lot of those questions they're somewhat different, but somewhat thematically similar. You know, this guy's living in I remember, he says he's living in sort of a permanent vacation. And I remember seeing some of the earliest Villages advertisements I saw, free golf for the rest of your life. And, coming here is like a permanent vacation. So I was like, oh, interesting, huh? But I definitely, I kind of caught some sort of bug when I was with him, not literally, but maybe more conceptually. I was very interested in these ideas of paradise and utopias. And, of course, growing up in Florida, I had heard of the Villages several times, since I was like 12 years old. And I was fascinated by it, more so as sort of this urban, an experiment in urban design in terms of utopian-like communities. There's nothing quite like the Villages. It's probably one of the most successful, radical experiments in not only, age segregated communities, but also as, also obviously the largest retirement community in America, and one of the fastest growing cities in our country. So I was just sort of fascinated. I wanted to go. I didn't know anyone there. My grandparents, who are familiar with the Villages, they were in Delray. I was about 5 hours away from the Villages, from where I grew up. So I just decided to, I had to see it for myself. I journeyed down without a camera, and I lived in the community for several months in a rented Airbnb. I rented a room from these two lovely people who also happened to be retired rodeo clowns. So, then I just kind of went around and saw the world for myself and tried to really ingratiate myself as much as I could with the community. And the resulting film came out of almost 2 years, off and on, about over 18 months of just, living inside the community, going back to school, then coming back, then going back, that kind of, I was there for several months, and then I would kind of leave and figure out what footage I had and edit, and then I'd come back again. So in some ways, I really did feel like I tried to live as kind of nestled in and embedded as I could in the villages proper, and living very close to the subjects of the film's houses. And I feel like I've lived in all walks of. I've lived near Brownwood. I've lived near. I lived in Spanish Springs. I lived near Sumter. Like I lived in Fenney. I really saw like all kinds of different. I tried hitting every single borough of the villages and different the new different developments. As we were making the film.
The movie itself is not about the villages. It's about some people that live in the villages. Could you kind of just tell us the plot in a nutshell?
Yeah, so this is a film that explores the lives of 4 residents of the villages who are having a tough time, kind of fitting into, I guess, more of the marketing brochure, the advertised way of life that exists in the villages. This isn't a movie, like you're saying. This isn't a film about the villages explicitly. This is a film about, kind of more of an existential condition, something that I found to be very relatable. I as someone who, I like to make films about people who are kind of on the margins of not society, but, I made another film about a bunch of folks who are airline employees who live, these are pilots, flight attendants, mechanics. They live at an LAX parking lot because it's kind of their home away from home. I'm interested in these sorts of stories of how people take up homes in these kinds of unfamiliar spaces and places. And I thought the villages was sort of a great setting for a lot of these very human stories to blossom and to find those kinds of people. So in my mind, this was never intended to be an expose, put down. I'm not interested in making those kinds of films. And I'm not even really, I don't think the villages in my mind exists in this kind of reductive binary. I didn't want to make a film that says the villages is great, or I didn't want to make a film that said the villages is terrible. I wanted to just make a movie about people being people. This isn't a film about elderly people in my mind. This is a film about people who are still growing and becoming, and in some ways they kind of resemble characters in like a John Hughes movie, like you could even say maybe any of the coming of age movies that John Hughes has made. Ferris Bueller's Day Off. You look at The Breakfast Club. Like I honestly see some of the parallels of just the idea that you never really stop coming of age, and that a lot of the folks in this film still feel like they're in their 20s, and that was I am in my 20s. So there was this interesting fusion that happened, and it was great. It was I loved in a lot of ways. I'd love to come back if people don't come out with me with pitchforks. I'd love to I really loved living there, and I feel like I really got a lot better at pickleball and all kinds of sports activities that I was pretty bad at when I first got into town.
I couldn't help but notice that you are too young for almost all the pools in the villages.
That's right.
We have the family pools. You can go there, Lance.
Yeah. I know. Well, I had one of those villages guest cards, which sometimes helped me get around, but yeah, I mean, for the most part, again, this is another thing that I was in just seeing some of the reception I from folks in the community. I was surprised to see that, I don't know if it's people who have seen the film who are reacting this way, or people who have just heard about it. And I think the trailer to the film is not fully representative of what the movie is actually about. But, in my mind, again, this isn't a film. This movie is not called The Villages Movie. This is called Some Kind of Heaven, right? This is a film that is very specific to these 4 people's stories. And, the reason why I thought it should be set in the villages is that I thought there was this fascinating kind of tension between these folks who are trying to figure out their lives still and better themselves. And, these people, while their stories may be very specific to them, I think, stories of marital dysfunction and trying to kind of, save your marriage and figure out who your spouse is after 40 years. A lot of people go through that. And the story of a widow who's trying to kind of figure herself out again. And the story of a bachelor who, in a very kind of, maybe most unconventional, but he's also looking for love and maybe all the wrong places. So these are all stories that concern relationships. And I think, this question of heaven, of some people who see the villages as they do see it as some kind of heaven. It's a beautiful, amazing place with so many clubs, so many activities, so many things to do. And a lot of those things are actually in the film. And then you have sort of the kind of more, I wouldn't call it ironic, but you have the other side of that question, which is kind of where the point of view of some of our subjects lie, which is that they thought they were kind of going to go to this magic place that would solve all their problems. And they figured out, surprise, surprise, that your problems never really go away and that those problems can actually follow you to wherever you go. So this isn't a film that is about, trying to kind of, I'm not trying to judge. I'm not trying to criticize. I was simply just amazed that, the resilience in these subjects' lives, the ways in which they led us into their lives as well. And the sort of the beauty that they're able, I think, you never get to the sweetness without the sour. So there's a lot of, I felt like this journey was very impactful. And as a younger person, I just was, I felt like I learned a whole lot about what it means to grow old and be human.
When we were back in Indiana, our oldest son, all our sons are military. He has buddy that has parents down here, and he got to come to the villages one time. And he told us, you should go investigate this place. It's a retirement community. My mind immediately went to the movie Cocoon, with Don Amici and Wilford Brimley and those guys.
Yeah.
And it just turns out those characters are kind of like the characters in your movie. But on the other hand, you've got your young, vibrant people, down here in the villages. And some of those are the ones that are disappointed with the movie because they want it to be about the villages.
The happy place.
The happy place, the commercial of the villages.
Right.
Yours is more real, true to life for many people. Just not all the people.
Right. Well, I mean, look, it's not, I don't think it's like such a revelatory idea that like everyone has problems no matter where you go. But I think I love Cocoon. That's a movie I grew up with. And when I first was thinking about wanting to make a film in the villages, the thing that made me interested in the place to begin with was that it was this place that kind of was designed to take you back, designed to sort of simulate, the memories, the community, the images kind of from the 50s, the 60s, a different era. And I thought how interesting. I had been familiar with a researcher named Ellen Langer who came up with this study called the counterclockwise theory, where if you stick a bunch of older folks in a kind of her study was creating an environment that was designed to kind of also take people back. And she brought, I think, about 10 seniors. She put them in an environment that she artificially kind of recreated to make it seem like it was from the 50s or maybe it was even the 40s. And what she ended up finding in her studies was that, a lot of these folks, not only psychologically, their lives improved, but physically, their eyesight, everything about the way they were looking and talking, there was this real verve. It really was like a real life version of Cocoon. So I thought, okay, well, that's a fascinating experiment. It seems like the villages in some ways is not just an experiment. That's the way people live en masse. And the fact that it has become one of the fastest growing cities in our country, the fact that so many folks are moving speaks and really is a testament to the to I think the successful, how successful the place is in doing a lot of those things. So to me, and hopefully when people see the film, this isn't a movie, again, that I'm not interested in looking at, to me, I'm not interested in really looking at the politics of anything. I'm not really interested in looking at the of the sort of the crazy hedonistic, that all the weird rumors about the sex stuff, which seem to be mostly false. I was interested in looking at stories about people and people that may not be any different than you and I, even though, they're going through things that are very specific to them. And hopefully when people see the film, they'll see the clubs, they'll see the activities, they'll see the fun and the joy that so many people have in the community. But I think the other side of that too, is that so many folks, there are a large majority of people too, that aren't quite able to sort of tap into the fun of everything because of the problems that are going on in their own lives.
Now, that's the big question that we get, and some of the comments on our review. Some people think these are actors, these people, but they're not. They're real people.
Yeah.
And you found them during the time that you embedded yourself in the community, and you had leads maybe or whatever, but these are real people with real stories. These aren't actors. Now, some people think Barbara's an actor because she's in the acting club.
Right.
And that's where you found her. In fact, I think you told me when you just went to observe the acting club.
Right.
But these are real people with real stories, and it's not a setup at all.
No, not at all. I mean, I was telling you guys earlier, but I talk with Reggie and Barbara and Dennis like once a week, even after we finished shooting. This was like we've become, like, in some ways I feel like they're family to me at this point. And we all were just sort of like, oh my God, people are saying we're actors. And I'm like, yeah, it kind of completely shocked us that was the reaction people had. I basically, my approach to making this film, I spent a lot of time in the villages, as I was saying, without a camera, kind of just embedding myself as much as I could. The two gracious hosts that I stayed with, they kind of printed out a club listing document, a PDF, where I was, I went through and I highlighted the most interesting clubs I could see. And I would reach out to people and say, hey, I'm a filmmaker. When I first started making this film, I was still in college. I don't really know what I'm doing here. I just know that the place is fascinating. Will you let me kind of observe your club and meet some folks? And sometimes people would say no, and I'd say, okay, no worries. And then other times people would say, okay, yeah, why not? Sure. So I would go to several clubs. I went to places. I went to the Zumba club. I went to the Elaine club. I went to the golf cart synchronization drill team, club. I went all over the place. And every time I'd go to these places, I just would say, I'd kind of give another variation of the speech. I don't know what I'm doing. If you have interesting stories, please share them with me. I'd love to talk to you. And that was really the process for a long time. Without a camera, I was going around and just talking to people. And that's how I found Reggie, Ann, Barbara, and Dennis. Barbara, as you mentioned, she is an aspiring actress. And I think that probably there was a level to which, being in front of a camera, no matter what you do, even if you're just shooting a slice of life documentary like we did, obviously everyone always becomes aware when you're on camera. And I think she was able to tap into her, sort of the performance of how she normally is, while being herself. But Barbara but Ann and Reggie and Dennis, these are people that are real people who happen to live in the villages. And I found them. And I wanted to make a film with all four of them, not as some kind of larger than life statement, at the time, at least. These are the four people that I connected with the most. I felt like we were very much spiritually kind of aligned. I was interested in, with Reggie and Ann, how did they possibly, two very different people, how do they stay together? With Barbara, how does someone rebound after, something really horrible happens when you lose your spouse? And with Dennis, this is a bachelor whose life hasn't changed seemingly. His attitude towards life is exactly the same as it was when he was seemingly my age. So, how does he think? How does he act? How does he try to find love? And these were questions that I was just thinking about all the time. And I think it's important to also note that I didn't kind of come into the villages with some preconceived idea that I was going to paint a negative portrait of the place or find these people. And I needed to find four people, and I had it written down on a sheet like this. Like never, documentaries. I think if you go into a documentary saying I'm going to I'm just going to find the people that can help me tell this story, and you don't remain open and curious, then you're never really you're not going to make a good movie in my mind. So
you kind of creep people out here in the Villages when you showed Dennis dropping his drawers and showering at the pool.
Well, I'm sorry, but that's a thing he does, and that's the thing that's also interesting when people are like, Dennis isn't a real person. No, he's very real, and he, it was fascinating to see that.
Next time I go to the pool, I'm going to be going, is he here?
Yeah, I mean, he has a way of life that is so different than every person, that lives in the Villages, but yet his attitudes, I think his attitude towards women is definitely kind of disturbing in some ways, and maybe a lot of ways. But I think the things he's after, companionship, comfort, freedom, those are things that we all search for. So I do think there's, hopefully when people watch this film, no matter how skeptical they are of me or the movie itself, or even a subject like Dennis, I hope when they watch it, they'll be, somewhat moved by even his story, because I do think there's a lot to learn from him and seeing how he exists.
Some people are just thinking, he's so far from what you expect from someone. I mean, don't get me wrong. This guy, I want to be like Dennis when I'm 81. I mean, he's fit, he's good looking, he's sharp, he's witty. I mean, he's a great character.
Yeah.
But I don't want to live in my van when I'm 81. I can tell you that. But no, it was a nice find for you to find him for that.
Yeah, and he's someone I found actually at the Villages Singles Club. I was there meeting people in a similar fashion to how I was normally, and I met Dennis. He gave me a business card that said "Celebrity Handyman and Personal Companion for Hire." Did not know what that meant. Got to talking to him a little bit more, and I was like, "What do you live here?" And I realized that he was kind of masquerading as a villager, which was something he kind of commonly would do. So I just thought that, this is a guy who, again, I hope when people see this film, this in my mind, this movie is not representative of every person in the Villages. And I think the film is pretty clear on that stance. We show the clubs, we show the people who are having the great times of their lives, and I even watched so many of the marketing videos to kind of look at how are these images portrayed, because I wanted to kind of emulate them and be inside of the fantasy that the marketing videos also show. And then I wanted to show the other side of the people who didn't. And I think as a filmmaker, and as a journalist to some degree, I think it's always important to get, I'm not interested in turning real people's lives into sound bites, or, I'm not interested in making characters out of people. I want to get to know people and really, get to something a little deeper. So I hope, we'll see what people think. I feel like I've still seen so many of the tomatoes at the screen virtually, I guess, but I really do hope, even someone when you see the story of Anne and Reggie, for example, they're two amazing, amazing people. And I hope people see the resilience, in Anne, who's able to sort of work things out with her husband after things really go south, and with Barbara, I hope they see her bravery and something that I also imagine is not also uncommon here, which is what happens when your spouse dies. And with Dennis, I'm sure a lot of people will say this is a horrible thing that happens here, but it exists. And I think we should, I don't think we should just block out the fact that someone like Dennis exists in the Villages. There are other people, I imagine, like Dennis that actually haven't been discovered yet that do a similar thing. So I think it's all there. And the fact that folks are saying it's fake, it's fiction, I think it does a disservice to, the bravery and the courage and the beauty that are sort of in these 4 stories, or 3 stories rather.
Well, the criticism, I think, as does for our channel and for the Villages, comes from people that haven't seen your movie, that have expectations of what they think it's about. Mm-hmm. Mostly, the Villages takes a lot of heat from people that have heard the rumors and innuendo, but have never actually been here. Mm-hmm. It's eye-opening to be here, just like it's eye-opening to see your movie. And I wanted to tell you that I really found the photography and the music and just the overall atmosphere that you create to be masterful.
Wow.
And I really
Thank
enjoyed
you.
that. Yeah.
I'll have to. I'm gonna get that quote framed, and I'm gonna send it to. I'm gonna print it out, and I'm gonna send it to my cinematographer and my composer, my cinematographer, the camera guy who worked on the film with me. He was my best friend. I've been working with him since I was like 17. But he's a big fan of your channel too. Because we would watch it while we were shooting, and he told me, he texted me because I told him I was speaking with you guys, and he told me to say that he loves you both.
Well, thank you.
David Bolin is his name.
What was his name?
David Bolin.
Okay, thanks, David. We appreciate it. It's very uncommon in my mind for someone your age to relate so well to senior citizens, and I think that speaks a lot about you.
Yeah.
What's your next project? Do you have one in mind?
I'm working on a few things. I'm working on a fiction film right now, and then I'm also working on another documentary. And the nice thing about working with your friends, and that's also the other thing. My sister produced this film with me, and I had to convince. She's my oldest sister, and I worked with her on a lot of my work, my previous films. She also has a full-time job, so every time I go and make something, I have to convince her to come with her kid brother, because the dynamic is always very fun. But it's been I think the experience of making this movie, it was me, my sister, my camera guy who I've known for so long, my sound guy who I've worked with a bunch, one of my college best friends. That kind of crew is something I want to keep. I want to keep working with the same sort of pod on my future projects, just because I really feel like not only, stylistically and the execution and technically did we do something that I'm really proud of, but I think we all just had this, like, I think once in a lifetime kind of experiences in the villages, like, the love and the trust and the sheer amount of time we spent with Anne, Reggie, Barbara, and Dennis. It's like I feel like I've told you guys this, but I'm just like, I'm sad that I'm sad the experience is over, because I really wish we could keep going back and keep filming to some degree.
Well, we appreciate you so much for being here with us, and just keep us in mind after you do, have that mega hit, that we can have you back on our show again sometime.
That would be if that mega hit ever happens, you will be the first people I call, and I would love to come back on the show. Thank you guys so much for being so kind and having me on, and I really appreciate your support, and it was unexpected, and I'm very grateful that you had me on.
All right, Lance, thank you, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Well, that was very nice of him to take time from his busy schedule to come and talk to us via Zoom.
Yes.
And we appreciate that very much. It gave me a lot of insight, and now we know those were not actors. Those are real people.
Right.
And the purpose of the film was not at all about the villages, really. It's kind of, in his words, to show that people, even in a utopian setting, can have real problems.
Yes.
And it sure did show that. So thanks, Lance Oppenheim, for appearing with us today. We really appreciate it.
Until next time.
See you when you get here.